Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, we are back on board with Chicago Slayer, ENVOY, the man himself, as he and the Chicago Huntsmen are going to battle against the Minnesota ROKKR. So, if you missed this scrim, the first thing that I'll say is that this was a super competitive scrim. So, it ended up being, through the first 4 maps, it was 2-2. And then the last map, the St. Petrograd, it was a 250 to 244 finish that Chicago almost came back on. They were down like 245 to 190 as it went to P5. They were able to get basically all of that time as it rotated to P1. They were able to get in there. They tied it up like 245 to 245. And then they just weren't able to clutch up inside that last hill. So they ended up losing 250 to 244. But it was super entertaining. I really enjoyed watching all of these matches. And what I'll say is that when it comes to Hardpoint, at least, now, of course, we have Domination and we have Search, and there's a lot of other things, but these two teams are really close in terms of how they perform on Hardpoint. Normally, the smaller maps, such as this, where it really heavily favors faster SMG play, usually tend to go the way of Chicago, whereas the bigger maps, the Azir Caves, the St. Petrograds, those maps tend to go the way of Minnesota. So that's something to think about when it comes to vetoes, because of course that has an effect on who ends up winning a match, right? If you get the maps that you're better at or the ones that favor you the most, then you're probably going to do well in that matchup. So that's just something to think about. I really wish that the CDL would show those map vetoes, because it would give us a greater insight into, okay, you know what? Chicago is not very good at this. They obviously want to veto St. Petrograd, so let's see what happens when they face another team that has really fast SMGs like Dallas. Or I don't know, I really wish that we could see that a little bit. Now, I will say that they probably don't want to. That's probably a little bit of a coaching decision too, right? Because if you're making those vetoes, then next time, say you're playing Atlanta and you're vetoing certain maps, then when you go to play Toronto or somebody else, they'll have a little bit of a better idea in terms of what maps you don't want to play. So that could be part of it. But I know that was a long-winded intro here. There's just a lot on my mind as we go into this week of the CDL. But right now, we have rotated from P2 over to P3. So the current hill is P3. Chicago does have control, but they don't have control of spawn. So that's why you saw ENVOY trying to push around the backside there. They are trying to push out these spawns, and for P3 or for P4, it's really not all that important. P3 can be taken advantage of from either side of the hardpoint, right? It's beneficial to have the warehouse spawns, but it doesn't matter really in the grand scheme of things which side you approach P3 from. And because of that, let me go ahead, let me pause this, let me show you the minimap real quick, because I want to make sure you guys are understanding this. So if we are on P3, let's say you have the spawn that's over here, kind of by B-Dom, right? Well, as you approach, there's really just the one cutoff right here in boxes, right? You just have to get that cutoff. And if you can get into boxes, then you can start to kill them as they come out of warehouse. So again, you're in P3, there's just 1 or 2 cutoffs. The further you can push up, the better chance you're going to have to max out time inside of P3. Now let's think the other way. If you're coming from P5, you just have to push up and get kills here in B-Dom. And if you can push up a little bit further, and you can start to get kills in this range. So it really is the exact same, right? It doesn't matter too much what side you come from for P3. Either side, it's easy to hold. But the difference is that if you're spawning in warehouse by P5, now you have the spawns for P5, and that's really the money hill on this specific map, right? When it comes to money hills, you want to hold down P2, you want to hold down P5. P1 and P4 are pretty much contested either way, and P3 can be won from either side. So right now, if you're Chicago, this is a little bit of trouble, because you don't have control of P4 and you don't have spawns for P5. So that poses a little bit of an issue, because what happens is that P5 is the easiest to hold. It's the one that you tend to get the most points out of. So if you don't have maps set up for P5, then you have to try to get as much time inside of P4 as you possibly can. So say your enemies get 50 seconds inside of P5, you want to at least try to get 30 or 40 inside of P4. That way you can minimize that damage. Or in the best case scenario, you can just push up like Chicago did right here and take over spawns for P5 and continue to get time inside of P4. I know that they're not getting it right now, but they basically had control of P4 for the first 40 or 45 seconds, and now that it's rotated back to P5, they have spawns, they have map control, they have basically, they're sitting as good as you could probably sit. It does look like Minnesota's starting to push up a little bit, and as you see ENVOY come up off of spawns right here, if he's spawning over towards woods, that means that Minnesota is spawning over towards coal. So it usually ends up being pretty contested inside this hard point. Nice job from ENVOY to sneak behind. That's a big two-piece, really nice job of pre-aiming that second person. But really all he's trying to do right now is he was just trying to be a nuisance, right? Because as he's back there, his teammates weren't there to help him. So he's just trying to stay in the back, get as many kills, and force the enemy to push him back there, because if they're pushing him in the back, then that means it's easier for his teammates to get inside of P5. So with about 9 seconds left, it does look like Chicago is going to win this first set of rotations, but not by very much. They won the first set of rotations by, I don't know, somewhere in the 12 or 13 point, which in this scenario doesn't really make you feel all that comfortable, right? If you want to feel comfortable after the first set of rotations, your score should really be in like the 120 to 130 range. Weird challenge there from Gunless. Probably wasn't going to have much success there, but we'll see where he comes up. So as from Gunless, I can't believe I just said Gunless. You can see what's on my mind. But as ENVOY comes up off of spawns, they are still spawning over there by P2. So that's a good sign because, again, Money Hills, P2 and P5. So at the end of P5, they pushed out. They were able to flip spawns. They got the spawn for P2. So let's see if they can hold it moving forward. But best thing about these scrims is that we can get inside their heads and listen to team comms a little bit. So with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn up the audio. Let's listen in and hear what Chicago's talking about as they progress a little bit further into the second set of rotations.
Smoked crates.
Alex is half full.
What's up, crates? We're playing. We don't have a ride anymore, guys.
I have right.
Bathroom.
Got one.
Right.
Bathroom came out. There's two back left and open train. Open train.
Billy in the green train right side.
I'm going around the back.
I need side door.
Billy that. Billy that side door. All left, guys. Left.
Red door.
Front up, Alex. Front up. Pinch right.
I got.
Oh, my bad.
Right.
Right door hurt.
I should have. Bathroom's back. I'm looking at this.
Could be red door.
I'm gonna get your back. I have your back.
So just so that we're keeping tabs here, this map has turned into basically the same as P5 was. I know Chicago's getting the majority of the points, but when you see ENVOY come up off of spawns, he's spawning on that top side of the map, which means Minnesota was able to push through the bottom side of the map, and that's a nice kill there. It seemed like ENVOY was trying to pinch there, trying not to allow Minnesota out, because essentially, even though Minnesota doesn't have control of the current hard point, if they're able to get out, then they're going to get that P5 spawn again, right? That's just how the rotations work. Let me go ahead. Let me show you that real quick just so that we're all on the same page. If Minnesota was spawning down here at the bottom of P2, that's why everything was contested. As ENVOY came up off a spawn, he was spawning towards the top of the map. So what ENVOY was trying to do there as he released is he's running through middle, and you saw him try to get kills in this area right here. Because as this progresses, Minnesota is going to stop putting so many resources into P2, and they're just going to flank out and try to get behind P5. If they can flank out, get all the way behind P5, now they're going to try to get spawns for P3, P4, and P5, just kind of similar to what they did the first set of rotations. So we'll see how this ends up playing out. But with that, let's go ahead, let's listen in again and hear exactly what Chicago's talking about.
ROKKR's hurt, dude. Wow, good plays, Alex. He's laying down. Jump. Go for mid control.
He's in pipes, guys. What the fuck,
Forest assault.
Yo, he could be vents.
I'm still got pipes. Those not peeking. Yo, pipes set.
I'm bathrooms.
Assault
Trophy
deep
now.
forest.
It was ace of
Sometimes
pipes. It
you
was
make
ace
it
of
so
pipes. It was ace of pipes.
I don't see anything deep forest. Yeah, he's still there.
Yeah, in pipes. Ace
Front,
and
Deep
collapse.
forest dead.
Bro, pipes,
I'm
guys.
dead. I'm gonna die from pipes.
Oh, A-Dom right now?
Ace of one shot.
A-Dom absolute.
One shot.
Throwing shit at hill.
Yo, 2 A-Dom and 1
Yes, I'm
deep
dead.
forest. There's only one time, guys.
No trophy in hill either, guys.
Wow.
Justin one shot. Mitten
On the
back.
left side.
One new, too.
Green dead.
Let's go.
So right now, things really aren't going all that well for Chicago. They haven't been able to get into P3, and ENVOY, who's the person that normally hits that flank trying to get behind, most of the time when you see Chicago flip right here on the rotation from P2 to P3, it's ENVOY that's the one that's getting behind people and getting those spawns behind P5. So not only was he unsuccessful, but they also gave up about 50 points inside of P3. So they didn't flip spawns, and they weren't able to contest inside of P3. So we'll see what happens here moving forward. But again, it's super critical that Chicago is able to get a ton of time inside of P4 just to kind of mitigate what Minnesota is able to capture inside of P5. Let's turn it back up. Listen to their team comms.
I have time.
Green.
Go, Matt.
I'm going top.
Boxes, dead. You have to look for me, right, guys?
Yeah, I'm pushing up.
Go P5.
Push,
P5.
Will.
Keep playing slow, guys. They're all spawning there.
I'm pulling time. I'm
Forward,
pulling
forward,
time.
forward,
You can
forward,
push through in a sec. You're doing dope.
P4's got
There's
a
a dom truck on me.
Push up there. Keep pushing there. Help Preston.
I'm trying to help you, AT, Caden.
Strong go, you guys. Strong go.
Dirt
Hey,
ramp
I'm dead.
and deep A-dom. Dirt ramp.
Their ramp hurt. There's 3 ADOM. 3 ADOM. Yo, let's push both sides and spawn kill. Push both sides and spawn kill.
You go.
I'm about to help you, Alex. I'm about to help you.
Going
I'm
right.
ready.
Come you to help me. Come you to help me.
Yeah, I'm coming right. I'm coming right.
One
Kick close for ramp, I'm pretty sure.
Dirt
I
ramp.
don't see anything.
Never mind. One's back up, one truck, guys, behind the
I
truck.
don't see any boxes. Yo, turn around, Seth. Turn around, Seth.
Behind the truck.
Lay down, down.
Good time, hurt.
Shit on bad.
3.
Naded me?
Alex, one here.
Go fast.
Deep right.
No, he got me. Dude, there's 2 in time.
Got one.
They're close, you not too.
I died.
One back door.
Back right, guys.
You gotta spawn kill him? Actually, just flood. We can just flood. We can get in. There's like 2.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh my god, I'm gonna rage.
Dead.
Breathing mid. Hopping over half wall. Hopping
Hey,
over
no,
half wall
wait,
right now.
no,
Ace him.
And one's boxes.
Mid spawn
There's
deep.
2.
Boxes dead.
More dog,
You got another one?
Nice.
All right, so pretty lengthy play right there that we just listened into. One thing that I'll say is that Chicago was successful in pushing into P5 and getting the last 20 or 30 seconds. I don't know how much I love that play because they sent every resource into P5, whereas if they give up those last 20 seconds to Minnesota, of course that's not what you want to do, but it's basically a tie ball game. So by them pushing forward and taking over P5, that locks them into that back P5 spawn. Now, luckily, somebody was able to sneak through over by BDOM. I didn't see exactly who it was. I was following the minimap, but I couldn't see who it was. But if they weren't able to flip spawns there, then it would be highly likely that they're not able to win off of P1 and they didn't have spawns for P2. So they kind of potentially set themselves up for a way to lose this map. Now, luckily, if you're a Chicago fan, it ended up working out because they were able to get behind. So they now have map control for P2. But let's see how this plays out as we go through the 3rd set of rotations here.
Absolute
Rock,
rock.
wait, absolutely.
Really weak.
What's our rock?
I hit him 3 or 4 times.
Top. He's in water. And then 2 on ult.
I lied,
Wait, he's
I
above
lied.
me, great.
Top crates. Top crates.
Gotta get right.
Yeah, you have
Top
window?
crates dead.
You going window, Matt?
I'm getting one.
One shot on ult.
Yo, right.
Is he already through?
What are you gonna do about it? I lied.
I don't know. Probably just not trust you next
Where are
time.
they spawning?
He should be right. Should be right.
Right, guys.
Got 2
I
lockers.
want to back up hill.
Go another water.
Yeah, I
right,
gave up
right,
left.
right.
I gave up left.
Okay, I'm gonna play top crate and
Go
watch left.
in the green train ceiling.
Spawn right.
Oh my
Green
god,
train.
dude.
Burgering.
I have your jump.
Even the pros don't have the best of movement sometimes. It does look like with the last couple seconds here that they are going to be able to pull out the victory. So, I don't know. It wasn't the most clean thing we've ever seen, right? There were multiple times where, like, especially that last P5 push on the 2nd set of rotations, maybe that wasn't the best move moving forward just because, again, you set yourself up for a way to lose. Even though they didn't lose, the possibility of them losing that game was definitely there. ENVOY went 30 and 32. Not the best map we've ever seen from him. RCD's had a really good map, 35, 33. Looks like everybody was pretty much 1 or 2 positive or 1 or 2 even on both sides, right? If you look down below, Assault 32 and 26. Basically, everybody except for Silly. Silly was -10. But outside of that, a really closely contested matchup here on Gunrunner, which is what happened throughout the entire series. So with that, guys, if you're new around here and you enjoy this sort of content, I put out brand new videos breaking down CDL gameplay every single day. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you guys have any comments on this, let me know down below. Leave a like before you head on the way. It really helps out the channel. With that, guys, thank you so much. I will catch you in tomorrow's episode.